Hi everybody, how's it going? This is Eden Mabon of lightcycleastrology.com. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Today we are talking about Venus entering the sign of Aries, which took place at around 5 a.m. Eastern Time this Monday morning. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this channel is supported by my consultation service at lightcycleastrology.com. We are seeking new clientele for 2023, so if you're interested in a consultation or becoming a client, please go to lightcycleastrology.com and message me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, let's go ahead and pull Venus up on the real-time clock here and take a look at her new position in the sign of Aries. Now, Venus hasn't been in this sign since May 2022. She spends about 24 days this year going through the sign of Aries, and she moves out on March 17th. Now, one thing that we always see when Venus transitions from Pisces into Aries is we see that Venus goes through a dignity change. She moves out of a sign where she is said to be exalted and lifted up, and she moves into a sign where she doesn't retain that dignity. Now, I think that this is a really important word to kind of meditate on or pause on, this quality of dignity that the ancient astrologers were using, the language that they were using to describe and make the planets relatable to our regular experiences down here on Earth. So if you think about this concept of dignity, if you have dignity, it's as if you're maybe somebody that has some kind of important wealth or knowledge. You have resources. Maybe you're somebody that's notable in the society. And all of these ways in which you might be a notable person or individual gives you better access to opportunities or resources and just makes life generally easier to do. So if you think about a planet losing that kind of dignity, there could be two basic scenarios. One thing that could happen is you just get a sense that somebody may lose that importance, that notoriety or wealth. And, in a best case scenario of that, you could just become more of somebody that just blends in with the common folk. There's nothing stand out about you anymore. A worse case scenario could be a fall from grace, where maybe you were actually brought down by some kind of hubris or inflated ego or something like that. So a planet that goes through a change from exaltation out of exaltation, there is always this symbolism that may speak to either something that planet represents just becoming less prominent and in the forefront, and maybe just taking more of a blended, common backseat kind of position, or it could represent some kind of fall, some kind of situation where something is brought down, is humbled, a fall from grace or a fall from importance in somehow or another. So within the context of how people may experience this changeover of Venus in their birth charts, or how we might see this in the world in a mundane sense, there may be certain situations where it could have just been something that you were working on that was very creative, that was maybe taking precedent for that time in your life, and you were just really humming away on something Venusian like that. Could be a relationship that was getting going, and it just, it occupied and dominated the forefront of the stage of life for a moment. And now Venus might be representing something like a calming down or a blending in back to some kind of normal position for those types of things. A worst case scenario could be something like, an example, let's say maybe there's like an artist who becomes famous during Venus going through Pisces in their birth chart. Maybe they have it in their Pisces in their 10th house, or maybe in their 5th house or something. But in one way or another, maybe this is like an example of somebody that rises to fame and doesn't quite know how to handle that fame, and makes social ill graces, or it behaves in a way that is socially unacceptable. And then we see this transition where that dignity is lost, right? That social grace is brought down to a place of humility. that could be more of a worst case scenario. But in any case, we always see this changeover when Venus enters Aries and leaves that exaltation status, as we do with other planets that leave their place of exaltation. But that's one way in which you could see Venus running through Aries. Now, generally what we do is we start off with a few fundamental things. Whenever we want to understand a planet in any sign, we always look to see who is the host of that sign. In this case, it's going to be Mars. Mars is the ruler of Aries and Scorpio in ancient astrology. So we look at Mars and we always say a couple of things. We always want to look for, does Mars see Aries from where he is currently? Now, from Gemini, the whole sign of Gemini has a viewpoint or visibility back to the whole sign of Aries by a inferior sextile. So right off the bat, we know that that is good. Mars is having reception and visibility back to Aries. That means that Mars is not indifferent to Venus. Mars will provide Mars-y kinds of resources to Venus. And we also see that Mars is receiving a superior trine from Mercury. That's actually a really good omen because Mercury is the domicile lord of where Mars is visiting. Mercury is the temple lord of Gemini. So we see Mars is in pretty good condition. He's not really in a place of exaltation. He's not in a place of depression. So there isn't extremes. He's pretty much in a neutral place, but he's receiving this really powerful trine from his host lord. So that is an indicator that as Venus changes signs and loses that dignity, it's not likely to be those worst case scenarios for Venus because there's just good visibility and support from planets that Venus is relying on, namely Mars, but then Mars is relying on Mercury. So there's a whole chain of command. But suffice it to say that as Venus loses that dignity, I think it's more likely to signify something like Venusian things becoming less at the forefront, but not so much the fall from grace kind of thing, because Mars is in such good dignity. So that's one way in which you could see this particular entrance of Venus into the sign of Aries, is just to look at Mars and see, how is Mars doing? What's happening to him? Now, one thing that is really interesting, let me just look at my notes here. This changes after a while. By March 2nd, Mercury will move into Pisces and be fallen. Mercury will also be under the beams of the sun and be in whole sign square reception to Mars, giving Mars fallen Mercury kinds of resources to work with. So this is one thing that is really important. So by about March 2nd, which isn't all that far away, let me just go forward here. We see that here comes Mercury moving into the sign of Pisces. Right there, March 3rd, March 2nd. Now, let me go ahead and put back in the sun just for a moment so you can see that Mercury is also under the beams of the sun by this point. Mercury is at 1 degree. The sun is at 12 degrees, almost 13 degrees. Mercury is within that 15-degree range where he is invisible in the sky. Mercury is also in the sign of his depression. So not only is he not in a great place, he's in a pretty bad place. Actually, Mercury in Pisces was said to be in a place that is contrary to one of his own temples and a place where he was depressed or fallen down. So Mercury things only hold together for just a few days or like a week or so. And then we see that there's a pretty drastic change. So this is going to affect Venus as sort of a trickle-down effect, you could say. Mercury is going to be providing pretty precarious things to Mars. Mars is going to have to work with those precarious Mercury kinds of things. Mars is going to provide those Mars-y precarious Mercury things back to Venus, and Venus is going to have to deal with it. So we do see a little bit of a fall as time goes on for Venus's good standing here through Mars and Mars through Mercury. So that is something that is specific to Venus in Aries right now. But as for the archetypal themes of just how is Venus just in the sign in Aries in particular, one of the things that's really important to look at is that Venus is she's visiting a temple that is opposite to one of her home temples. Venus in ancient astrology is the ruler of Taurus and Libra. So there are some very basic archetypal tensions. If you have a planet in fall in your natal birth chart, or in detriment, as they call it, or even some people refer to it as like contrariety. I prefer the word contrariety because I feel detriment is kind of vague. I don't really connect with that so much, but contrary or contrariety is something that I really understand, because what you're essentially saying is that when a planet is in the opposite place to one of that planet's temples, it's like that planet could not be further away from their own natural place as possible. If Venus is back in Pisces, she's not quite as far away from her temple as she could be. If Venus goes into Taurus, she's starting to come back towards her temple. So Aries is the absolute furthest place away from Libra that you could be in. It's directly opposite. So one of the ways in which that is interpreted in ancient astrology is simply to say that, if I'm Venus and I like artistic things, I'm like visiting an ammo store, or something like I'm in a place that is it's as far removed from what I like and what I prefer as possible. So you get these interesting archetypal tensions. So if you have a planet in detriment or fall, it isn't quote unquote bad. It's just that there is a strange kind of tension. That's the way that it's most useful to think about planets in these particular places. So Venus has this strange kind of tension in Aries. You could think of it like anything that is opposite to Venus kinds of things. That's the kind of tension that you work with. So I do have a couple of examples of these archetypal tensions that I came up with, and I'll share them. Or archetypal themes here. So archetypal tension between the lovers. It is the mystery of something we don't totally understand that it simultaneously creates fear and attraction. This one I really, really, really like. Now, I am actually myself a native of a Venus in a sign of contrary or contrariety. I have Venus in Scorpio, and this is Venus in another temple that is opposite to one of her temples, the temple of Taurus. So I have some sense personally of this kind of archetypal theme. I don't have it in Aries, but I do have it in Scorpio, which is a little bit similar. Theme number one would be archetypal tension between the lovers. It is the mystery of something we don't totally understand that simultaneously creates fear and attraction. If you think about the different ways in which people are attracted to each other, if you think about the kinds of times in your life where you've been attracted, especially like really, really uncontrollably attracted to somebody, you might notice that that person had a certain kind of enigmatic quality, a sort of mystery to them. It's like you can't quite understand them all the way. And a lot of times you get this tension where it's like frustrating. And so sometimes you don't like them even. They bother you, they annoy you, but it's actually that tension, that dynamic tension that creates the attraction that makes it so hard to get away from them and not love them at the same time. So when you get Mars and Venus together, when Venus is in Mars' sign, you really get that sort of tension. For instance, Venus can never ever understand Mars. I forgot to look this up in my notes, but there was that really classic book from an astrologer author titled "Women Are from Venus, Men Are from Mars." I think that was an astrologer who titled that. If somebody knows, that would be a great thing for the comment section. But that is a really, really good example of this. Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. I don't think you have to limit it to females are from Venus and males are from Mars. I think that, every person living on the planet has a Venus in their chart somewhere, whether they're a man or a woman. Every person has a Mars somewhere in their chart, whether they're a woman or a man. So we have both of these planets in our chart. We have both of these aspects to our existence. But so it's not to say that it's like we're limiting this to gender or sex. But what is interesting is that certain examples of this, like Venus will never, ever truly know what it's like to just be like, that's it. I'm done. I'm cutting you off. I'm walking away. I'm making war on you. I'm out of here. Like, screw you. That's Mars in a grumpy mood, right? Venus doesn't know that. That's not what she does. She says, in Libra, she's like, maybe we can find some common ground. Maybe we should just relax, let's just chill out. Or in Taurus, she's like, let me make you some food. Like, let's just enjoy ourselves. And likewise, Mars will never know the pleasure of just going, you know what? Let's just enjoy life. Take it slow, take it easy. That's not what Mars does, right? Mars will never say, hey, let's just sit down and crochet something together and watch a movie. No, Mars is like trying to make something happen in the garage or something. So there's part of this dynamic that you get this idea where women are from Venus, men are from Mars. There's a part of the archetypal tension that can never, ever, ever be bridged. I guess another example of this, which is I'm seeing very clearly right now, is my pregnant wife. She's telling me how weird it is to have, a being that's gestating inside her belly, that's kicking and moving around and hitting her organs. As a biological male, I can never, ever totally understand what that's like. In fact, I think that would freak me out. I don't know if I could handle that, honestly. I will never know what that's like. So there are certain ways in which the lovers can't quite bridge the gap, but it's precisely that mystery between them, that annoyance or tension or inability to understand each other, that actually provides the attraction in the first place. If you're not attracted to things that are just kind of boring, a lot of people need that edgy kind of mystery to draw them in. They need that excitement. So that's very common within human nature, to sort of be attracted to things that are kind of dangerous and also mysterious. So that is, for me, theme number one is things that oftentimes create fear also create attraction. There's that kind of tension. Also, if you think, this is another caveat to that, if you think about Venus being exalted in the sign of Pisces, well, one of the reasons why Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces is because they say that Pisces anticipates the springtime. It looks forward to the sensual qualities of spring and all the sense pleasure of warmth and light returning and fertility that happens during the springtime. Well, if Venus is 1 month before the realization of that actual springtime, which happens at the beginning of Aries, why wouldn't Venus find some pleasure in the sign of Aries, even though it's as far away from her own temple in Libra as possible? So I think that she does, right? You don't anticipate something and then you get it and you're like, I've got no interest in this. I think that Venus actually likes to be in the temple of Mars through this sort of fear of the unknown, but excitement that is created from that fear of the unknown. There's that tension between the lovers that can never be bridged, can never totally be understood, that keeps things interesting, that keeps the attraction there. And if that isn't present, that's when people lose attraction. So I think that you get Venus anticipating the springtime. She's exalted in Pisces. And when she goes actually into the springtime, yes, it's not it's not who she is. She isn't Mars, but she still, I think, finds a lot of excitement and attraction, mystery, danger, fear that all commingle to sort of make things really, really sensual for her in a certain way. So that's one way in which this general theme runs when you have Venus in the sign of Aries. Okay, another way, the desire to overcome and win victory, to be the leader. This, we have to remember, is also the place where the sun is exalted, and the sun is the leader. The dark half of the year is overcome at the time of the spring equinox, which is the beginning of Aries. So we see that the sun being exalted, we see the sun as the natural victor over 6 months of darkness that is symbolically tied in with the planet Saturn. So Saturn is in its fall in the sign of Aries, and the sun is exalted. So the winter falls, but the light becomes victorious. So Venus representing desire to win victory, to be a leader that leads things towards victory. I think that that is also a really big theme here. One of the things that I recently watched on YouTube was on the channel Craig and Ford. And I'm sorry I forget the content creator's name, but maybe it's just Craig. But if you want to watch a really, really interesting video on Venus, I think it's titled Venus, the Most Ancient Goddess. But Craig and Ford talks about how Venus is on the one side of a lot of different coinage in the ancient world. And he makes a point that he says, Venus is supposed to be about love and beauty and harmony and sex and things like this. Why is she always on the flip side of coins that have emperors and conquerors on it? Well, basically what he gets at, and I think that I don't think he uses or practices astrology himself, because he comes to the conclusion that basically Venus is a symbol, or was a goddess that represented not just sex and beauty and love, but also was a goddess that represented the desire to go to war and conquer. So Venus was a planet of good fortune that would give you the desire in which to overcome. If you don't have the desire to become a great emperor and take over new lands, it doesn't happen, right? Without the desire, nothing can start. So Venus does represent, and Venus can be paired with Mars. Very, very interestingly so. When you think about this desire to overcome, to win victory, to be a leader, to conquer, that is definitely a big theme here. Okay. Also, we could see the desire for new things. That's simply because this is a springtime sign, and the cardinality of Aries is one that is taking one season and turning it into another. We see the season of winter transforming and changing into the season of spring during Aries. So those are new shoots of springtime things that could manifest. So I think the desire for new things is definitely a part of what Venus does in the sign of Aries. Okay, another theme is desire acted on in a quick and rash way. Part of this could also be like loving superficial might, a brawn physique. Both of these are just speaking to that Venus is a planet that has a big spectrum, an archetypal quality to her. And one of the shadowy sides of Venus is to be vain or superficial, sort of to like things on the surface, that vanity quality of Venus, that desire or lust or coveting or jealousy or greed. And when you get Mars, a planet that likes to smash and grab, that likes to raid, that likes to go into lands and take what he wants, you do see that there's this really quick, rash kind of way in which Venus could do things like, well, I just want love and I want it now. And I'm not going to it's not even going to cross my mind whether it's something I should do or not. So you definitely get this very rash, quick, impulsive kind of Venus. And I think that also could connect to that shadowy side of Venus where maybe she could wander into the territories of, vanity or superficiality. So things like just finding just the outside appearance is very beautiful. Venus in Aries, I think, really does that, especially if it's like a really macho or brawn kind of physique that has the muscles, has the strength. Also, you get things like loving valor, bravery, dominance, competition, and the hero or the hero's quest. Again, we see this interesting pairing where we have the exaltation of the sun. Now, some of Mars's more constructive qualities are his valor, having that sportsmanship, that valor, that bravery, that, and also sacrifice. Mars is a planet that sacrifices. He lays down his own life to protect the ones he loves. So you could see some of that definitely here as well, where Venus is a planet of peace and Mars is a planet of sacrifice. What needs to be sacrificed in order to get to peace? Or the opposite of that is, does peace become sacrificed in order to get war? You kind of see both sides of that here, I think, a little bit. But also, again, the love for dominance, competition, and the hero or the hero's quest. You definitely get that very beautiful or handsome kind of knight in shining armor quality to Venus in Aries. Okay, some last few ones here. The aesthetics of military uniforms, athletic pageantry or graceful, beautiful sports, things like figure skating, ice skating. That's a really good example of Venus in Aries, the graceful beauty, but also mixed in with the competition. Even the blades on the ice skates are more like Mars, but then like the beauty of the ice skater is more like Venus. Sports entertainment and recreation. We got Super Bowl Sunday that just happened, right? That's a pretty good Venus in Aries kind of thing, even though that happened slightly before Venus enters Aries. That's also an interesting one because you have the social context of Venus, where Venus likes to bring things together. Venus likes to bring all sorts of things together and harmonize them. But then you have Mars, who's very interested in competition and sports. So you could see things like sports stadiums, especially social engagements. Okay, and last but not least, we have peace that is won by a war. The war to end all wars. That's what they said for World War II. They talked about, we need to go to war because this will be the war that makes it so we never have to fight again. That's also an interesting one, which I sort of just mentioned a second ago, but you get that idea that it's like, we want peace, but we need to sacrifice peace by having war to get to peace. There is that kind of philosophy almost with this. So that is a few archetypal themes for Venus in Aries, and in particular, how we might see some of these weeks going by here while Venus is in Aries this time around this year. I hope you found something useful out of this. Please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment in the comment section how you see these showing up in your life. That's always really useful. Or if you have any reflections on your own on Venus and Aries, or if you have it in your natal chart, those are always really nice to share in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another astrology video. Now, just FYI, this week I'm only doing content for today, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because I have family that's in town, so I won't have quite as much time to make content. So look for Wednesday and Friday this week, and then the week following we'll be back to a normal schedule. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll be back soon with another astrology video. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.